There is a man somewhere in America right now telling a state trooper that the gold fringe on the courtroom flag means the law has no jurisdiction over him. He is wrong. He is also about to be handcuffed. Hi, I'm Marc Lopez. I am a criminal defense lawyer, and I have spent my entire career inside courtrooms watching people try and fail to argue their way out of a criminal charge using tricks they learned on the internet. Today, we are going to walk through 5 of those tricks. I'm going to tell you exactly why each one gets you arrested, and then, because I want you to win these encounters, I'm going to tell you what to say instead. Quick context, because this matters. Everything we're about to talk about comes out of a movement. Some people call it the sovereign citizen movement, some people call it pseudo-law, and some people call it Freeman on the land. The labels changed, but the argument does not. In 2011, the FBI publicly identified the movement as a domestic terror threat because, over the years, traffic stops involving adherents have ended in officers being killed. This is the serious part. I'm going to make some jokes today because the legal arguments are absurd, but the consequences aren't. Here's the thing that's interesting about this movement, and this is the part nobody talks about. Almost all of these so-called tricks are built upon real constitutional rights. A right that actually works. A right that I would be thrilled for you to use correctly. The problem is they take this real right, like the right to remain silent, and they bolt on a bunch of nonsense. The nonsense is what gets you arrested. And then the real right, well, the one that would have protected you, that gets buried under the rubble. So let's dig out the actual rights. Trick by trick, running scoreboard, by the way. Each of these arguments, how many times have any of them actually beaten a real charge in real court? And we are starting with 0. Number 1, the big one. The one I see in every other viral clip. Officer, I'm not driving, I'm traveling. Driving is a commercial activity. Traveling is my constitutional right. Therefore, I don't need a license, registration, or insurance. Okay, here's the actual law. In 1915, the United States Supreme Court decided the case called Hendrick v. Maryland. They held the states can absolutely require drivers to be licensed and vehicles to be registered. And that's been the rule for over 100 years. Every state Supreme Court that has looked at the right to travel equals the right to drive unlicensed argument has rejected it. Yes, you have a constitutional right to travel. You can walk, you can ride, you can bike, you can take a bus, you can hire a driver. What you cannot do is operate a 2-ton machine on a public road without a license. That is not travel, that is driving. The Supreme Court has thought so for longer than the airplane has existed. Scorecard, 0. Trick 2. This is the one where someone looks at the name of the driver's license, you know, the name in all capital letters, and decides that the all caps name is a separate legal entity, a straw man, a corporate fiction, and they, the flesh and blood human being, are not that entity. Therefore, the citation is for the straw man, not them. Marc Lopez. Marc Lopez. Listen, it's the same. Capital letters are a printing convention. They're how the BMV's printer formats names. It's not a jurisdictional fact. There is no published court decision anywhere in this country that has held that the all-caps version of your name is a separate person from you. Federal courts have used words like frivolous, patently without merit, and my personal favorite, so devoid of substance to be unworthy of further analysis. That last one is judge speak for get this nonsense out of my court. So the scoreboard is still 0. Trick 3. This is the multi-tool. It comes in many different flavors. I do not consent to this interaction. I'm a private American national, not a federal citizen. I'm not in commerce. This is a contract, and I did not enter into this contract. Here is what's wild about this. Buried inside that pile of jurisdictional nonsense, there is a perfectly good idea. You actually do have the right to refuse consent to a search. You actually do have the right to remain silent. Those are real. But I do not consent to the existence of this traffic stop. It is not a real thing. A traffic stop is not a contract you opt into. It is a Fourth Amendment seizure governed by the Fourth Amendment. The officer doesn't need your consent to conduct the stop. He needs reasonable suspicion. 2 different doctrines, 2 different bodies of case law. And in most states, there is a stop and identify statute. Once an officer has reasonable suspicion to detain you, you have to identify yourself. Refusing to do so isn't a sovereign citizen power move. It's typically an additional charge. So the scoreboard is still 0. Trick number 4. This is a fan favorite. Someone demands the officer produce a signed contract proving the person agreed to be bound by the laws of the state. That is not how the law works. The law is not a contract. You don't have to personally agree that murder should be illegal in order for it to be illegal. The legitimacy of a statute does not depend on whether you individually sat down and signed a piece of paper. If it did, there would be no laws because not a single person watching this video signed a contract agreeing to any of these laws. The actual source of the state's authority is something called the social contract, which is a metaphor. It's political theory metaphor. It's not a physical document the trooper carries in his glove box. If the trooper had a contract signed by the people he pulled over, well, my job would be a lot easier. Scoreboard is still 0. Trick number 5. This is where it gets exotic. Someone cites the Uniform Commercial Code or Admiralty Law or the gold fringe on the courtroom flag. Yes, they really do argue that. To argue the court doesn't have jurisdiction over them. Here is a quick reality check. The Uniform Commercial Code governs the sale of goods, contracts, promissory notes, bills of lading. It is not a criminal procedure code. It is not a traffic code. Citing the UCC during a DUI stop is like quoting a recipe for pancakes during open heart surgery. The words may be real, but they're not relevant. Admiralty law applies to the high seas. Unless you committed your alleged offense on a boat in international waters, that's also not your statute. And the gold fringe on the flag? It's decorative. It's a flag code convention used by military and ceremonial flags. It has been raised in courtrooms across the country. Federal judges have called it patently frivolous, utterly without merit, and one of my favorites, a recurring waste of judicial resources. Scoreboard is still 0. 5 tricks, 5 zeros. So enough of what doesn't work. Here is actually what works at a traffic stop. 5 things. Pay attention, because this is the version of the video that the YouTube gurus don't want you to see. 1. Identify yourself when the state law requires it. In Indiana, that's after a lawful traffic stop. Give the officer your name, your driver's license, your registration, your insurance. That's it. You're not waiving anything by complying with a lawful order. You are setting yourself up to win later on the legal turf where you actually win these things, which is in court. Number 2, don't answer investigative questions. Where are you coming from? Where are you going? Have you had anything to drink tonight? The right answer is some version of, officer, I'm not going to be answering any questions. Calm, polite, boring, final. That is invoking your Fifth Amendment correctly. Notice what's missing. No capital letters, no UCC citations, no mentioning of the flag's decorations. Number 3, don't consent to searches. If the officer asks, the answer is, I do not consent to any searches. Don't yell it. Don't recite it like an incantation. Just say it once, clearly. This preserves your Fourth Amendment argument later on. Answer that every time they ask, even if it's a different variation. I do not consent to any searches. 4, comply with lawful orders. Step out of the car if asked. Keep your hands visible. Do not physically resist. You fight the case in court with your words, with a lawyer, not on the side of the road, not on camera. And then 5, ask, am I free to leave? This is truly a magic question. If the answer is yes, you leave. Don't keep talking. Don't ask questions. You leave quietly. If the answer is no, well, you just clarified that you are being detained, which matters for every single Fourth Amendment argument. That's it. 5 sentences, no magic words, no flag fringe, no nonsense argument at the side of the road. Just a real version of the Constitution used in the way that it was meant to be used. Remember, the Constitution is not a magic spell. It is a structure. And if you use it correctly, it does work. Now listen, I am not your lawyer. This isn't legal advice. Every case is fact-specific. If you ever find yourself in one of these encounters, call a defense lawyer in your jurisdiction. But I am a lawyer, and I'd rather you hear the real version of this from me than some fake guy on YouTube with a flag pin and a webcam who is not going to be there for you at your booking photo. Now, if you watch this video this long, you must like me just a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit. I'm begging you. If you have some sort of comment on whether I remind you of somebody, let me know. Getting a lot of heat. John Iguazamo, Jack Black, like the Jack references. That hurts my feelings. Somebody called me a bargain basement turtle from Entourage, and that hurt, but it made me laugh. So I do like it when comments make me laugh. If you or a loved one are charged with a crime in Indiana, give me and my team a call here at the Marc Lopez Law Firm. We would love to talk to you about your options. Most importantly, remember, always plead the fifth.